Hi, I'm Squdlum, and I enjoy making incredibly complicated patcher presets and then giving them out for free because I'm a wonderful person and I just want everybody to be happy. I've created a patcher preset called Fracked LFO, and it is intended to make automation so much easier. Complex automation. If you're a Neuro producer, you might be familiar with how awful it is to create those bases. You know, in Neuro, base involves so much filtering, it involves so much resampling. You can take so much time creating that kind of sound that you want. And I've tried to make something that will speed that process up a bit for you and for anybody who's interested. So I've created this demo loop here. It's not a Neuro thing. It's just a little dubsteppy bass, whatever. And what we're going to do with this bass is add a low pass and just automate the filter cutoff. And hopefully we'll be using Fracked LFO for that. So hopefully you'll be able to see its potential and its possibility. And I'm going to show you a pre-made kind of thing I've set up here. Our bass is on insert 17. I've named it Grumbler, and it is routed to insert 18, not to the master. Insert 18 goes out through a series of inserts and eventually reaches the master. So I've got this patcher preset here. This is our Fracked LFO, and this is what it sounds like. You can see the automation. This is what our filter cutoff is doing. So before we get into the patcher preset, I want to lay down some basics so that you understand what's happening and how to use it. The whole thing is based on the Fruity Peak controller, which generates audio or automation values based on either the volume of your input signal or an LFO, preset LFO that you've got here. So if I play the bass right now, its volume is being used to generate some automation values. I can set that to 0 and it's not doing anything now. And we've got your LFO that we can use just normally. So the way you link to the LFO value is you right click on your control that you want to automate, you link to controller, and in your internal controllers, you're going to see the peak controller that you've set up. So I'm going to set it to the LFO here. And now any change that we make in the LFO will automate the fast LP. The bass is pretty much your cutoff frequency or just the general value that you've set your control to. So if we move this, you're going to hear the filter go up and down. You've got your volume or amount. If you set it higher to a positive value, then it's going to go above your bass level. If you set it negative, it's going to go below your bass level. So it's either the minimum or the maximum, and your bass is the opposite. You've got your speed, which is actually, if I'll set a volume level here. So you've got your speed, and a lower value is faster, a higher value is slower. It's kind of counterintuitive to me, but I can see why it works that way. If you hold control, and you can see in here on the hint panel, I'm going to move it up to 2. And that's going to create a tempo synced bass. So you can you can change the tension too, which is how much time is spent at the bottom or the top of your automation. So here we've got a lot of time at the maximum value and a lot of time at the minimum. And the phase pretty much changes where it starts, where the whatchamacallit, the automation, where it starts, you know, pretty much basic stuff. So now that we've got that all set up, let's open up our patcher preset. So this looks a bit cramped right now, and that's because I've got my GUI settings up higher than they would be normally so that people on mobile can see a bit better. So it's going to look less cramped and actually fit on your screen, hopefully. So this is the internal workings, the wiring of all this. It's kind of crazy. And this is your control panel. You've got LFO1, and that's pretty much your basic, this is like the functionality of the peak controller right here. You've got your bass, your volume, I've named it amount, and your speed. And the speed, I've inverted it. So up is faster, down is slower, because it makes more sense to me. And I want this to feel intuitive and not kind of confusing, which the peak controller can be. So yeah, and then underneath each of these, well, you've got your LFO1 right here, right? You've also got this main adjustment panel, which is your main tension and main phase. I'm probably going to rename this to tension before I distribute it, so this will look different. Below each of these sliders, you've got these other panels, which are the modulation for the above slider. So this is pretty much an LFO for this, and this is an LFO for this. This is an LFO for this, and this is an LFO for this, and this is an LFO for this. So these kind of let you stack LFOs on top of each other, and for each panel, you've also got your tension and phase, which adjusts just the panel's LFOs here. And I think that's pretty much it. You've got a visualizer too, and I'll be switching here and showing you what happens when you're modulating different things. So there are several ways to automate a value through Fracked LFO. This is the simplest way that I'm about to show you. You've got your audio signal coming from FL Studio. It goes to this pass-through, and then the pass-through sends it back to FL Studio. And you can automate within the Fracked LFO plugin or preset. You can drag in whatever plugin you want to automate. In my case, it's parametric EQ. You're gonna put it in the path from the pass-through to the external FL Studio, and I'm gonna create a low pass pretty much. And I'm gonna activate this value. So now we've activated the cutoff. And final LFO, this part right here, is the automation that you're creating. And you can just link that up to whatever value you're automating, and now you've got it within your preset. So let's go through the controls here. We'll create the basic bass again that we did before with the Fruity Peak controller. And one thing that this plugin has, if you just use this section, one advantage it has over the Peak controller is I've included a tempo sync. I've painstakingly gone through, and you can turn this on and the speed snaps to tempo friendly values. You saw how much trouble it was to get it to like a good tempo value. All right, and the visualizer will show the main output of your LFO1 right here. And what you'll notice is that these controls here and these little bars here, they've mirrored what we've set here. All right, so now let's move down to the modulation sections right here. This is where things get complicated. So the base modulation sections are pretty much just adding LFOs on top of your LFOs. Pretty useful already. If this was all that we had, like this would already be pretty powerful. And I'm going to do something really drastic so that you can see how it affects your whole signal right here. We've got the same modulation going on. I'm going to make, and this is this XY. I should mention that it corresponds to the amount and the speed, and the base is set to the same as this. So if we want the base to rise over time, we do this, and I'm going to make it rise very slowly over time. So now when we play the signal, and you can see on this visualizer, the LFO is how this value is changing over time based on what modulation you add to it. And each section, as I mentioned before, has its own skew and phase so that you can have more fine control over that. Your amount LFO changes the amount over time. So say you want this maximum value to slowly go down for a bit more variation. Okay, so we can drag this down and then we'll get like a more subtle bass. You can see that modulation happening right here. And then your speed changes. This one's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but it helps if you look at the visualizer to see what you're doing. The speed lets you make it go faster or slower, faster or slower. It's again complicated, but if I show you on this visualizer right here, you can see as this value goes above the level of what we set before, the speed of our modulation gets faster and then slower. I'm going to give you some tips for getting some interesting stuff out of here. I like to, when I've been playing around with it and using it, I like to start slow and kind of go fast or more detailed over time. So I try to get the basic movement. I get like a really subtle kind of, I can start kind of like right here and make it a slower, modulation. And then I can use these, I can hop back and forth between these to fine tune that signal and get slower and more granular so that eventually like I have a really fast amount LFO that's really subtle. And you can hear that kind of sound. And yeah, I think that's, generally what I find is useful is because this is going above your base level is whatever you set here. So you're going above this level right here, right? So it never dips below. So generally I find it useful to have a value up on the positive part of the XY and in the negative part of the XY, or just the Y. And that kind of lets your modulation dip below and above your base level right here. So one of the limitations of Patcher is that you cannot link external controls to the internal parameters or automation of a Patcher preset. So I had to find a way to take out that automation value and be able to link it to an external plugin. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now. We've got Patcher that we're going to load up here. And I'm going to disable this because there's no audio coming out here. I've created this setup here. We've got an insert called generator, which is side chained to two other inserts called signal 1 and signal 2. Our base is still the same. It's going out to this empty insert now, which is going out to the master. So we've got our generator. We've got a patcher inside of here. I'm going to add a plugin patcher, and we can deactivate this and deactivate this. And so now we're going to load Fracked LFO inside of this patcher and export this signal to external FL Studio. And the way I've done this is by generating a sine wave. This only happens when FL Studio is playing in play mode. So if I'm not playing the track, there's no signal being generated. But this signal generator creates a sine wave at 0 decibels. And your LFO CV here will, your final LFO will control the volume level of your CV, which will then go out to FL Studio if you select send CV. So if I send CV, you're going to hear a constant sine wave. Or maybe not. I don't know. You should be, because it's not going out to FL Studio. So now you're going to hear a constant sine wave. And it's going to, your modulation is applied to that sine wave. So now that you've got a signal coming out of Fracked LFO, say you want, no, that's not what I wanted. Hold on. Rename. That's what I'm doing. Say you want 3 instances of Fracked LFO creating 3 different signals. You can load up Fracked LFO in its default values, press send CV, and then you can duplicate it by dragging save preset as. And now you've got 2 instances of Fracked LFO at their default values sending CV out. And the reason I call it CV, CV is control voltage. It's a modular term, and I'm just using it as a way to kind of let people know that you can modulate externally. So I'm going to create Fracked LFO 1 and 2 and 3, and I can route to separate audio channels. So this one is going out to the generator channel. We can right click and go to audio here, and we have 2 other options. We have signal 1 and signal 2. And now these 2 will show up, and these 2 represent these inserts. So we can send Fracked LFO to signal 2 and Fracked LFO 3 to signal 3. And now we've got 3 separate signals. So we can take, now we've got audio values coming out for all 3 signals. It's going to sound terrible if I play it. So we can add a peak controller externally now. And that peak controller can take the volume levels. I'm going to set the decay to full, which is the fastest speed. And that's going to copy the volume automation exactly. And we're going to press mute so that there's no audio coming out. It's just generating a signal, which you can then link any control on any place to. So now you've got a Fruity Peak controller. And we're going to rename this Fruity Peak controller to Fracked LFO 1. Cool. So I'm going to generate these over, or I'm going to duplicate these over. Save preset as, boom. And save preset as, boom. So now we've got 3 signals on 3 different inserts. And I'm going to rename these, and then I'm going to set these values to random values. So we have some 3 different signals that we can automate things with. And I'll get back to you when I've done that. All right, so I've set my 3 different signals. They're all individual, and they're all going out to these individual peak controllers. So now I can load up a filter on top of my bass, and we can do the Why is it all the way over here? Oh my God. I can't even, what? Excuse me, I want to. Okay, so now we've got it loaded up and we can link to the external controllers. And we're doing, we have our Fracked LFO 1, 2, and 3 on our 3 separate inserts here. And we can choose the peak value, and now we will get the automation based on the peak value. And say we don't like that, we can go to Fracked LFO 2 peak. Which doesn't seem like it's doing much. Fracked LFO 3 is a different signal. So that one would definitely have to be compressed and turned up a bit. But basically, that's the way that you can generate 3 different signals from a single patcher instance. I'm going to show you how to generate or how to export the value that you're generating, and also use it inside of your first Fracked LFO instance. So let's set that up. All right, so I've reconfigured the mixer insert tracks. We've got our grumbler still going out to this, which is where we'll put our effects for this bass. We also have a theoretical other bass, which isn't in this track, but we can still put effects on this insert. And we have another insert called other automation, which will be where our send-CV signal goes. So I'm going to load up Patcher, Fracked LFO as you would. Fracked LFO. Boom. We're going to generate our, I'm going to do a basic signal here. Oh, and we of course need an effect to do things on. So I'm going to do the same low pass that we've been doing for demonstration purposes. And this is just like you were doing it internally before. So now we've got our basic signal. Now LFO CV is where the CV signal is being sent to. When you press send CV, it mutes your audio signal here. This is what the pass through is. It mutes it and sends out the CV, which is not what we want. And so when we press send CV, this is our pass through, it goes to 0, and this is our CV value, it goes to 80%, or the default 0 dB. So we can skip that and we can just send straight out to a different insert. So say we want to copy our, say we have other bass is like a layered bass, right? It's kind of higher up so that we have some more interesting content. We can sidechain our value or insert to the automation insert here. So sidechain here. And now when we right click on 2FL Studio, we'll get our other automation right here. Now we can send LFO CV straight here, and that's going to send out to this other bass automation. So now you're going to hear the sine wave on top of our bass. And now we can put on our peak controller, right? Where's our peak controller? There you are. Do our decay thing, set it to mute, and then go here and load up our filter and link our controller to the peak controller. And now our other bass has the exact same automation. I think that's it for here. Please subscribe if you are interested in seeing more Patcher content, because I have like a list of Patcher ideas. I'm interested in expanding the capability of native FL Studio So you don't have to download third-party VSTs. You can just use native FL Studio VSTs to create these interesting effects. And if you're here, I'm kind of interested to know, like, if you're subscribed now, which you should be, I'm interested to know what kind of content you watch from other music creation producers, what interests you, what interests you from this channel, so that I can create more of that. And tell me what you'd like to see, and I'll see what I can do about that. There's going to be a couple live streams coming out in the next couple days, or I just want to start live streaming music production content as I work on works in progress and create new stuff. And I've got some other video ideas in mind that will be beyond just patcher content. Like, I'll have some more song creation stuff, challenges, all that jazz. So yeah, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.